Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm John Macri, joined, as always, by PFF's lead fantasy analyst, Nathan Jahnke. Nate, week one, it's in the books. There's, always I would say, a ton of new data to sort through coming out of this first week of games. So how are you doing the morning after a wild week one?
It is tiring going through all that. Like I did the recap article, and there was pretty much something to write about for every running back group, every wide receiver group, every tight end group. Very little stayed the same from last year. There were a couple tight end groups that the rotation was pretty much the same. Running back, like Atlanta, was probably the only one that looked the same as last year. The splits between Bijan Robinson this week and the last 5 weeks of last season were eerily similar. Wide receiver was like the Giants. They have the same wide receiver rotation. It's still Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton out wide, Wan'Dale Robinson joining in the slot. Outside of those couple of things, pretty much everything else, there was something a little bit different from last year, a lot bit different from last year. Went through all of it in the recap, but it is hard keeping all of that straight in my head when it comes to writing all the other articles, doing rest of season rankings. We'll be doing rankings for this upcoming week. So it's just a lot to take in, a lot to remember. But we will focus on waivers for the rest of the show so we can focus on a specific thing to help you improve your team for the upcoming week and the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Week one, it's always it's fun to watch, but yeah, from a content perspective, it's always a good reminder that as much preparing we do in the off season and as much as we think we know, week one will always throw a wrench into that and change things up, and there's always so much more to learn. So yeah, like you said, we're going to approach it from a waiver wire perspective today. We're going to utilize Nate's waiver wire article, which you could see now on pff.com, to cover all the options that you could target this week. It was at least a relatively healthy week one. Fingers crossed that continues in the weeks ahead. But as we know, that won't be the case. But at least for week one, we avoided any kind of major fantasy option suffering major injuries. Just 16 more weeks to go now. Yeah, if you want to access Nate's waiver wire article on pff.com, you could do so with a PFF Plus subscription. So be sure to use the promo code PFF Fantasy Podcast 25 to get 25% off a PFF Plus subscription, and you'll get access to all of our rankings and articles and tools and PFF grades for every player on every team, which still appear live as the games are going on, so that you too can track snaps like Nate. So make sure that you use the promo code PFF Fantasy Podcast 25. That's 25, all one word. They give us a nice long one here for a promo code to save 25% off that lovely deal. But if you don't want to read and would rather listen to us discuss all those waiver wire targets instead, then let's get to it, Nate. We always have a lot to go through here coming out of week one. So let's waste no time. Start things off with the quarterback position and your top name for the position, Michael Penix Jr. of the Atlanta Falcons. What did you like about what you saw from Penix this week?
Oh, yeah. The fun thing about waivers is the start of waivers for every position heading into the week was take all of my sleepers that I liked heading into the season. Plenty of them are still available in plenty of leagues. Penix definitely fit that description, and he was one of the sleepers that had a fairly good week. Had threw some touchdowns, ran for one as well. Had some rushing production, which was nice to see out of him. He did it without Darnell Mooney, one of his top wide receivers, so that was also encouraging to see. Just generally played well, and so that was good. And then the Falcons have a relatively good schedule over the rest of the season. Not necessarily the best matchup this upcoming week if you are specifically looking for a quarterback this week, but if you're looking for a quarterback more long term, anyone who didn't draft one of those top 4, 5, or 6 quarterbacks, your best strategy is probably having 2 or maybe even 3 quarterbacks on your roster, just depending on how many bench spots you have, and starting whichever quarterback has the best matchup that week. And in a lot of weeks, Penix can be that quarterback. So he is someone that I would say is near the top of my waiver priority list because I think he can be in fantasy starting lineups for half the teams in the league for at least half of the games over the rest of the season.
Yeah, he was great. I think he was a top. We got him as a top 10 fantasy quarterback right now. As far as where he finished this week, he had the 4th most passing yards for the week as well. So yeah, just the one touchdown, but like if we're going to get 45 plus dropbacks and you've got playmakers like Bijan Robinson and Drake London and when he feels like it, Kyle Pitts in there to kind of make the most of those targets, then yeah, Penix could be cooking here. And yeah, he made the breakout article this year as well, because there's so much to like about the situation there with Penix, from the offensive weapons to the offensive line. And Also, I think like an underrated part of his game is that he's excellent at avoiding sacks as well. Like that was true of him in college. Last year as a starter in his few starts, and so far this year, it's just a 5.9% pressure to sack conversion rate in week one. So Falcons, I think, should be in a lot of close games if I had to guess. So I think plenty of reason to pass the ball. They were top 10 in pass rate in week one, which was a big difference from last year when they ranked like 26th overall. So yeah, maybe we get some nice passing volume from this offense in 2025. And if so, along with a healthy Drake London, I think Penix can absolutely cook. So yeah, a big fan of his, and hopefully can be rostered in a few more leagues now going forward. All right, Nate, next up, one of your faves, another one from this offseason, makes the list this week. Trevor Lawrence of the undefeated Jacksonville Jaguars. What did you think about his week one performance?
Honestly, the week one was a little disappointing. There were a lot of passes where the wide receivers were getting open. They just weren't the most accurate passes. So the wide receivers did not have as good of a game as I had hoped. So completed 19 of 31 passes, 178 yards, a touchdown and an interception, which should have been a decently favorable matchup against the Carolina Panthers. Didn't grade all that great this week, which went along with the inaccurate passes. So for me, a big thing this week is he's playing the Cincinnati Bengals, a team where Jacksonville is going to have to pass a lot to keep up with the Bengals offense. So hopefully this is a week where Lawrence is able to turn things around, learn some things from week one. Can be understandable that players in week one have a rough week when they are having a new coaching staff, new offense that they're playing in, new receivers they're throwing to, since Jacksonville has several new wide receivers. So I think he could turn it around over the course of the season. I think he can turn it around hopefully this upcoming week. If you are looking for a quarterback specifically this upcoming week, I'd probably take Lawrence over Penix at the moment, but Lawrence is also only available in 60% of leagues, so he might not be available in your.
Yeah, and like you said, it wasn't the best game. Hopefully, it's an adjustment thing, like you said, where game script and whatnot played a factor. Because yeah, it didn't look great. Two turnover worthy plays, no big time throws. Was able to avoid taking a sack as well. But I'm not out on him after 1 week and one game, right? Like, still believe in that offense, like you said. The potential for fantasy, I think, is absolutely there. Trevor Lawrence should be fine. Same thing with like Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. Like, they'll be just fine. I've seen some people who were out on Travis Hunter specifically already victory lapping. Let me tell you, folks, nothing worse than week one victory lappers. Let's just be patient. All right, Nate. We've also got a few deep league options here at the quarterback position, led by the one and only Danny Dimes of the Indianapolis Colts. But you also got Aaron Rodgers and Geno Smith. Tell us about this group for you.
Oh, yeah. So these last three quarterbacks, all available in at least 85% of leagues outside of Superflex leagues. Most of what we talk about in quarterback stuff isn't going to apply to Superflex throughout the season because all the quarterbacks are taken. But for these quarterbacks, it really depends what you are looking for. Daniel Jones had an excellent week one. We don't think that's going to necessarily continue because he scored multiple touchdowns. So those touchdowns definitely influence things. But Jones was a fantasy starting quarterback a couple years ago. He has three great targets that match his playing style of low average depth of target passes, where the receivers are doing a lot of the work afterwards. Michael Pittman, Tyler Warren both had very good week ones. Josh Downs, I think, is fully capable of that as well. It just not all three of them are going to have great weeks at the same time. The problem is Jones doesn't necessarily have the best schedule over these next couple weeks. Has some strong matchups week 4, week 5. So if you're looking to stash a quarterback more for the long term, I think Jones is the best option. Understandable if you don't want to believe in Jones after what he did with the Giants the past couple seasons. Aaron Rodgers, he statistically had a very good season, did not grade as well. He threw for the 4 touchdowns, but a lot of the inaccurate passes in there as well. So there's a chance Rodgers is able to return to some of his form, but I'm less optimistic because his grade wasn't as good. So we'll see what happens with him going forward. But just because Rodgers was at one point an elite fantasy quarterback, there's a chance that he reaches that level again. If you're looking for a safer option of the group, Geno Smith also had a fairly good game for the Raiders, threw for 362 yards, nearly 50 more than other quarterbacks over those early games. So Smith played well. The only concern is the Raiders don't have a great schedule. If you're thinking about it from the perspective of you're playing whichever quarterback has the best matchup, the Raiders don't face a team that was in the top 10 in allowing fantasy points to quarterbacks until after their week 8 bye. So I'm not sure there's really a time where Smith's going to be your best option. But if you are looking for a safer floor, if you're in a guillotine league, I think Smith probably has the safest floor of the three quarterbacks that are more widely available.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, there's some, yeah, I think some good options there. I mean, Daniel Jones, like we know the upside is there, right? It may be not as high as the top 5 fantasy quarterback that he was this week. And, he's not going to play a defense, I guess, that was as bad as Miami was in week 1. But like you said, there's going to be some favorable matchups there for sure. And yeah, the Aaron Rodgers thing was interesting, right? I think it was actually Tom Brady on the PFF podcast he did with the boss, Chris Collinsworth, talking about how things were so bad for Rodgers with the Jets that maybe going to like a more stable franchise and getting a fresh start could be like a resurgence to his game. And look, it's only one game, and one where Rodgers was particularly motivated, but still that Brady feller might have been onto something there. And then Geno Smith, we like him. Look, Brock Bowers looks like he's going to avoid major injury there with his knee. It was reported that he's day to day, so that definitely helps because Geno, I mean, he was chucking it. 362 passing yards, throwing it to guys like Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, Dante Thornton, Michael Mayer, Jack Besh, like not exactly household names. So really nice to see from Geno Smith there in week 1. Before I go on to the other positions, Nate, we got to let everybody know that this PFF betting segment is brought to you by DraftKings. And full credit goes to our PFF betting wizard, the great Mason Cameron, who has brought us a pick here for week 2, which is Garrett Wilson, an anytime touchdown at plus 205 versus the Buffalo Bills. So if you look at Garrett Wilson in week 1, I know we really liked his potential. We really like Justin Fields' potential. So far after week 1, that's worked out. We want to see it keep going here into the weeks ahead, and hopefully that continues in week 2 because Garrett Wilson, 87.7 receiving grade. That was the second highest in week 1. He had a 33-yard touchdown in there. If you look at the Buffalo coverage unit, they scored a 42.1 coverage grade. That ranked 29th out of 30 before Monday Night Football, that is. 26.1% of the Bills' passes allowed went for 15 plus yards. That was the most in week 1, and they allowed the 10th highest open target rate as well. So, we talked about the Garrett Wilson, Justin Fields connection. It looked really good in week 1. Buffalo also ran cover 1 on 31% of their defensive coverage snaps. That was the 6th most. And Garrett Wilson versus the Steelers in their cover 1 earned an 89.1 receiving grade. So really nice stuff there from Garrett Wilson, Justin Fields week 1. Again, hopefully it could continue. Again, I don't like the week 1 victory laps, but my many Justin Fields, Garrett Wilson stacks this season, they went off in week 1. I'm hopeful that we can keep that going here because this combo was heavily invested in me this year. So I'm really hoping that Mason's right because I like their chances in week 2 as well. So shout out Mason Cameron, but Garrett Wilson, anytime touchdown plus 205. And remember that lines and odds are subject to change. Also on DraftKings, you can not let one bad leg haunt your parlay. Parlays turn into payouts, and now even near misses won't haunt your bet. The NFL season is here. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is rewriting the rules with Ghost Leg, a new game-changing promotion that turns close calls into cold, hard cash. Best of all, it's available to all DraftKings customers. And here's how it works. You could build any 3+ leg parlay, pregame NFL parlay on Sunday, and you could apply your Ghost Leg token. And if one leg loses, DraftKings makes it vanish like it never existed and pays you out in the cash for the rest. Last season, over 30 million parlays were lost by a single leg. This year, Ghost Leg gives you those busted bets a second life. I know I had a 5-leg parlay this weekend. One didn't hit because Jared Verse didn't get a sack, but Ghost Leg was in, and boom, we had a nice plus 2,000 parlay. No more busted parlays that haunt you all season. With Ghost Leg, the bad leg vanishes, the payout doesn't. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code PFF, that's code PFF, to unlock Ghost Leg, the promotion that makes one bad leg disappear and pays you out in real cash. Ghost your losses, get your payout in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. Fees may apply in Illinois. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Opt for single use token. Minimum 3+ legs and minus 500 odds per leg. Max bet varies if only one leg of the bet loses. Bet will settle as if only the winning legs were placed and pays out in cash based on odds when the bet was placed. See terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. All right, Nate. Running backs are up next. Not exactly the most exciting group to choose from this week, but deep leagues are going to be locked into these names we're about to go over. And that starts with Dylan Sampson of the Cleveland Browns, available in close to 70% of ESPN leagues right now. What did you see with Dylan Sampson?
Oh yeah, first off, I agree. This running back group wasn't as exciting as we're typically seeing around this time of year. Last year, like guys like Jordan Mason, Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, not necessarily all week one, but this time of year where they were the clear waiver wire guys. In past years, there's typically even more. But this year, I think the fantasy community pretty well nailed which running backs were going to be fantasy relevant and which ones were not. Dylan Sampson is someone who is available in over 65% of leagues. And he was the one running back that was the clear early down running back that's available on waiver wires. He was in a two-man committee with Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford took the third downs, passing down work as well, 2-minute drill. So Dylan Sampson played on the early downs, made a lot of catches on those early downs. So that was good to see, since a lot of times we think of the third down back being the one who catches all the passes. But that's not always the case. There's plenty of time before the early down back has a lot of opportunities to catch passes. And that was the case this week with Dylan Sampson. So I think Sampson, if it remains just this two back committee, then Sampson is someone that's a borderline fantasy starter if the matchup is right. The big concern here and why Sampson doesn't get to belong with those other running backs that we talked about from last year is Quinshawn Judkins could be returning to the team very shortly. Right now, he is on this exempt list where the Browns don't have to activate him for this week, but it sounds like if practices are going well, that they will activate him for this week. In which case, it'll be much harder for Sampson to have fantasy value. I would think, if anything, Judkins will cut into Sampson's early down playing time before he cuts into Jerome Ford's passing down playing time. So could see this being a three-man committee for at least a little bit until the roles start to solidify a little bit more. But there is still a chance that Judkins is suspended at some point this season. While his legal troubles seem to be in the past, the NFL is still investigating the situation, and the NFL has suspended players in the past, even if that player did not end up getting into legal trouble. So there is still a chance that Judkins gets suspended, in which case Sampson would be the lead running back for Cleveland for whatever length that suspension is. So because there could be games this season where Sampson is the lead back for Cleveland, that makes him the top choice.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot still to sort out there in Cleveland, right? And even like around the goal line, I know Rocket Sanders he scored the short touchdown, which took that away from Dylan Sampson, which probably doesn't seem like it's going to be in the plans for him to be used at the goal line right now, at least based on the usage this week, right? Jerome Ford and Sanders got a lot of that work, but the rest of the usage I think is open there for Sampson, and then yeah, Judkins should get in there at some point as well. But I'm with you in that for now. Sampson is in starting consideration in those deeper leagues if he's available. So yeah, go get him. How about this one, Nate? Because Kenneth Gainwell was not a name that fantasy managers might have been thinking about when looking at the Steelers' backfield between Jaylen Warren and Caleb Johnson kind of dominating the spotlight. So, what did you see from Gainwell in week one to get him on this list for the Steelers?
Oh yeah, this is one where the preseason usage really played out in the regular season. It was eerily similar to the Steelers' running back rotation last year, except Jalen Warren was in the Najee Harris role and Kenneth Gainwell was in the Jalen Warren role. So Gainwell playing all of the third downs, all of the 2-minute drill, and then not quite half of the early down snaps, where Warren was taking almost more than half of the early down snaps, the goal line snaps, most of the short yardage snaps. So this is a case where it could be 1 week where Warren's the better fantasy option, 1 week Gainwell's the better fantasy option. We saw it flip a lot in Pittsburgh in the past couple years, who ended up scoring more fantasy points from 1 week to another. As long as this offense is playing well, that makes both of them borderline fantasy starters, but you don't know which one's going to have the better week, so it's really hard to trust either of them in your lineup. But there is a chance that there will be a number of weeks where Gainwell will be someone who scores enough fantasy points to be among the top 20 fantasy running backs. The one kind of wrench in this compared to the Steelers' backfields in past years is they did draft Caleb Johnson in the third round. We would think that sometime over the course of the season, Johnson would earn some more playing time. That doesn't necessarily it isn't necessarily going to be the case because there are plenty of times where second, third, fourth round rookies just don't end up being a factor in their backfield over the course of the season. We've seen that a number of times in recent years with the Rams rookie running backs, with Trey Benson in the past. So it's certainly a possibility where Johnson doesn't become a factor in this backfield at any point this season. But Gainwell, he was kind of the clear other option that saw significant playing time among the players on the waiver wire. Everyone else is more like speculative ads that things need to go right for them to potentially have fantasy value, where Gainwell can just be a top 20 fantasy running back over a number of weeks over the rest of the season, just probably not too many weeks over the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, right? Like, I mean, it's still surprising. I think considering the investment in Caleb Johnson as a day two pick. I know he was a fringe round one pick in rookie drafts this offseason as well. So I'm sure dynasty managers aren't loving this. But again, you could be patient. It doesn't mean it's the end here for Caleb Johnson. It's just 1 week. But I mean, clearly Gainwell working ahead there. So like you said, he'll have some use in deeper leagues. Absolutely. Um, we also had a trade yesterday, I guess it was, right, with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They sent off Tank Bigsby to the Philadelphia Eagles, Nate. So there's now one less body in the way of rookie Baishal Tootin on the depth chart. We like Tootin at draft time. Safe to say this move just adds to his value.
Oh yeah, very rude of the NFL to have a trade 15 minutes before Monday Night Football. I was updating the waiver article between commercials during Monday Night Football. The 5 to add, 5 to drop, 5 to buy low, 5 to sell high article had to get updated during Monday Night Football. I'm trying to do a better job of keeping my rest of season rankings updated, not just once a week, but throughout the week. So had to update rest of season rankings as well. But this is one of the changes that I made, that Tootin was added to the article because the week one usage was not great. We saw Travis Etienne as the clear lead running back. Allen was the third down back. So Tootin was fourth on the depth chart, really, but third on the depth chart on early downs. But then with Bigsby getting traded, Tootin's now the number two running back on early downs for Jacksonville. So not a role that I expect him to have immediate fantasy value, but because he missed some time in there, I think there's still time for him to work his way up. The fact that Travis Etienne played so well week one probably suggests that Tootin isn't going to see a starter role anytime soon, but I think it's at least possible. We saw with Liam Cohen last year, Tampa Bay's running back usage evolved over the course of the season based on how well the running backs were playing. So if Tootin plays well, I think Tootin has an opportunity to earn more playing time and maybe potentially become the starter at some point this season. But really, when you're looking at all these running backs like a Caleb Johnson in there as well, other guys that were day two, day three, a number of them already are on fantasy rosters. But if you're looking for a rookie to take a chance on that is available on the waiver wire in some leagues, Tootin is probably the top guy of those speculative rookies that could earn more playing time without an injury.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, look, Travis Etienne saying, not so fast on becoming an afterthought in that Jacksonville backfield as well. He looked great in week one. But like you said, at the very least, there's at least one person out of the way now for Baishal Tootin to maybe have some value. And maybe that role does evolve here as the year goes on. And if Travis Etienne could keep it up or not, we'll find out. But next up, Nate, the New York Jets backfield, which so far through 1 week, again, it's 1 week. I feel like I was wrong about because Brees Hall had a really nice game. The usage was pretty damn good for Hall. That being said, Braylon Allen still in there, still makes the list for you this week, Nate. What did you like about Braylon Allen's potential for the waivers?
Yeah, I'd say that we were at least somewhat right about the Jets backfield because it was a rotation for a lot of it. Brees Hall did not see as much playing time as he's used to seeing. We saw again played out like it did for that like 10 play stretch in the preseason where all three running backs were healthy. It was Brees Hall taking the majority of the early down work, Braylon Allen taking a high percentage of early down work, and then Isaiah Davis taking the third downs. And that's really how it played out in this one. They rotated a lot over the first three quarters. Fourth quarter, they started going a little bit more to Brees Hall. So I don't know if that was Hall having the hot hand, and we'll see this usage change next week, or if it's Hall has won the job after those three quarters, and now it's going to be Hall's job again, and we won't see Braylon Allen as much. Probably the biggest concern for me with Allen is Allen graded excellent in short yarded situations last year, but Brees Hall was still taking the majority of the goal line work and half of the short yarded situations where I expected Allen to be taking all of those. So This probably pushes Allen down the list for me rather than up the list. He moved down the rest of season rankings because of what happened in the game, but he is still someone who saw significant playing time in this game. He played 19 snaps, which is more than a lot of other running backs on the waiver wire. Some of the other ones who saw significant snaps, it was because of garbage time, where this was not garbage time. This was largely in the first three quarters, as well as seeing some snaps in the fourth quarter. So he makes the list because he is seeing playing time, and a lot of other running backs on the waiver wire are not seeing playing time. The Jets were really high on Allen heading into the season. And while Brees Hall played very well, there wasn't enough to say that Allen is bad now. I think they still like Allen. They just are probably happier with Hall now than they were before. So I'll be curious to see how this plays out. But if you're still looking for a running back near the bottom of your depth chart and want to cut the person you currently have, I think Allen is an option to pick up.
Yeah, makes sense. And yeah, I mean, look, that was part of where the discouragement came from me, was just the short yardage stuff. We really kind of leaned into that this offseason. All the numbers, pointed to Braylon Allen just being the better option there. But credit to Brees Hall, like he looked really good this week. Again, it's 1 week again, so we'll continue to monitor here, and things can change. But Brees Hall, at least through the first week, did look pretty good. And Braylon Allen still in there, still mixing in. Going to get some opportunities still going forward. All right, we have a few handcuff running backs as well, Nate. Not necessarily guys who made like a huge impact week one, but very clearly should be in consideration here should there be like an injury to the workhorse starter. We got Tyler Algier of the Atlanta Falcons backing up Bijan Robinson, obviously, and Taj Brooks of the Cincinnati Bengals backing up Chase Brown. What do you like about these two?
Yeah, there's like at least a dozen handcuffs that could be available in your league. So I picked two, one that's available in a ton of leagues and one that's available in some leagues. Algier being the one that's available in some leagues. He did have double digit carries this week, which is nice, but I still probably wouldn't trust him in my fantasy starting lineups because his playing time is not very much high. But if there were to be an injury to Bijan Robinson, Algier would completely take over that role. They have not invested in a third running back in that backfield, so Algier would see a ton of workload. He has graded well for us in the past. The Falcons still have a decent offensive line, so I think Algier would have a ton of fantasy production if something were to happen to Bijan Robinson. So Algier is my top handcuff to consider right now, and if you're looking specifically for a handcuff, Algier would probably be higher than some of the other running backs that we talked about. So it really depends if you're looking for a running back who you might need to start in the near future versus a running back that could have top 10 potential, because Algier probably has more top 10 potential than any of the running backs that we've talked about so far. And then Taj Brooks, similarly with the Cincinnati Bengals, he didn't see a snap on offense. It was all Chase Brown playing on early downs, Samaje Perine playing third downs, 2-minute drill situations. So the Bengals have a T-back committee, but if something were to happen to Brown, then I think it would be Brooks taking over as that early down role rather than Perine seeing an increase in playing time. And we've seen the Bengals running backs continue to have fantasy success in that early down role because the offense scores so many points. Their defenses are so focused on the passing game, it makes it easier for running backs. So I would look for Brooks. I know people are considering someone like DJ Giddens after he ran the ball a lot, but that was all in garbage time. Jonathan Taylor took the first 50 or so snaps for Indianapolis. Indianapolis was missing their receiving down back due to injury in this game, so that also impacted things. So while Giddens definitely a handcuff in Indianapolis, someone that you should consider if you're looking for a handcuff running back, just not the top handcuff option. And I would not care about his 12 carries because it was all after Indianapolis had a big lead.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, last running back is Miles Sanders, Nate. We saw the return of good Javonte Williams in week one, but is that week one fool's gold, or will he be reliable all year long? It's hard to know, but Miles Sanders also in the mix when he wasn't fumbling the ball away. He looked pretty decent as well. So Miles Sanders makes the list for you.
Yeah, like I still trust Williams to be the main guy. This is me trying to cater to as many different kind of leagues as I can. And Miles Sanders is specifically for a league where you are looking for a running back this week and are very desperate for a running back because Sanders will be the backup in this game. The big thing is they're facing the New York Giants, a team where I think the Cowboys can get a lead against, can run the ball a lot against. And Williams, he was playing close to 100% of snaps in passing situations and short yarded situations. but it was a little bit more of a mix in the normal everyday early down situations. So Sanders was getting some of that workload in last week's game. I think if they have a lead, they might be able to rotate a little bit more. Jaden Blue could be active for this game and certainly mess with that as well. But if you were looking for someone in a deeper league, Sanders was the one that stood out as someone who could see more work than all of the other guys that are available in 95+% of leagues. So if you are desperate for a running back this week for whatever reason and need someone off the waiver wire, Sanders is someone worth considering.
All right, we'll go on to the wide receivers in a second here, but I do want to let you guys know about Fitbod. So, since I've discovered Fitbod, not just my willingness to exercise has increased, but also the effectiveness in which I do has greatly improved because Fitbod takes the guesswork out and tracks your progress so you get the most out of your workout routine. If you're going to use the Fitbod app, I want to let you all know how easy it is to create your most optimal workout routine because if you're anything like me, you might not have the time to build a full workout into your day, especially during the NFL season. And sometimes, there's 4 or 5 games on at a time here. Getting out of the house as well is a task on its own. But where Fitbod could come in and help is by creating your own personal workout routine based on your goal, your fitness level, how much time you have to work out, and your available equipment so that you can set up an ideal workout routine from your home and while watching the games, more importantly. So it's easy to track your achievements. You could learn new exercises and share your progress with Fitbod's progress tracking charts, weekly reports, and sharing cards. You can keep track of your achievements and share them with friends and family. And then as you get stronger or master exercises, Fitbod adapts to push you a bit harder in your next workout. Fitbod's algorithm can also calculate new estimated strengths as you progress, which is a great way to kind of measure your results through the app. So get in shape with Fitbod. Join Fitbod today and get your personalized workout plan. Also get 25% off your subscription or try the app for free for 7 days at fitbod.me/PFF. That's FITBOD.me/PFF. Okay, Nate, we got plenty of wide receivers up next. And let's head back to Pittsburgh for the first name on the list here because while DK Metcalf was the obvious choice for wide receiver one there was at least some question about who would be wide receiver two. And after the first week, Calvin Austin looks like that man with a really nice 70 receiving yards, and a touchdown on 6 targets.
Yeah, wide receivers. There's a couple interesting names that are available in a very high percentage of leagues, so that was nice to see. Austin, he was someone that stood out at the end of last season. He was the slot receiver for Pittsburgh a lot of last season, but once he started getting more work on the outside, started playing a bit better, which was good to see. He spent a bit of time during training camp injured, didn't play in the preseason. So I started to get a little bit more concerned about if he was building chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. There was some talk of Roman Wilson potentially winning that number 2 job, but that was clearly not the case in this week 1 game. Austin was very consistently on the field, played 95% of 3 wide receiver sets, 81% of 2 wide receiver sets. So on the field for 80% of plays. No other Steelers wide receiver outside of Metcalf and Austin were above 20%. So Austin clearly ahead of all the other wide receivers. They kind of had an interesting rotation of how they use their receivers. Of Austin would line up sometimes in the slot, sometimes out wide, just depending on who that other wide receiver was. I think it was Skoranek playing in the slot when he was on the field, and then Roman Wilson playing out wide, moving Austin to the slot when he was on the field. So had a combination of outside and inside snaps. Aaron Rodgers has a long history of wide receivers who play both in the slot and out wide and rotate between those positions and having a lot of success with those players. So I think there's a chance that Austin could be a very significant part of the Steelers offense going forward. The tight ends had some targets here and there, but they seem to like, or Rodgers seemed to like Austin just as much, if not better than the tight ends. So I think Austin is someone capable of having a fairly big season if Rodgers can keep if Rodgers keeps playing decently well, and then also if they keep passing as much as they did. The big debate was how much are they going to run the ball because of Arthur Smith's history versus how much are they going to pass the ball with Aaron Rodgers' history. And they were definitely willing to pass the ball this upcoming week. So that is also something that makes me more optimistic about Austin, is that Pittsburgh seems pretty willing to pass the ball this season.
Yeah, first game looked like it for sure. So yeah, if Aaron could keep the momentum going and turn this offense into maybe more of a pass heavy approach and stifle the Arthur Smith run heavy philosophy, could be even better for Austin for sure. Okay, we got a lot of wide receivers, and Nate's definitely got a lot of notes on these guys. So I'll keep my responses short and sweet and keep us rolling here because we got Quentin Johnston up next, Nate. He turned up in week one, catching 5 passes for 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nate, is this a week one anomaly, or can QJ finally put it all together?
And we started seeing Johnston start to put things together a little bit more last season. He is someone who's their ex receiver, and he's been fairly dependent on touchdowns. We still haven't seen him have a really high target rate. So that's probably why Johnston is number two on the list, where I know he's number one for a lot of other people after this week. But he was the ex receiver. He was playing in two wide receiver sets, which was good to see, where McConkey was playing both in outside in two wide receiver sets and the spot in three wide receiver sets. Keenan Allen was basically just playing in those three wide receiver sets. Those backup wide receivers mixed in a little bit here and there, but it wasn't very significant. There was some thought that some of the rookies would take playing time away from Johnston, but that wasn't the case too much in this game. But it was really Vlad McConkey who had the highest target share, Keenan Allen who had a high target share, but the Chargers were passing the ball a lot this week, which also allowed Johnston to get a decent number of targets. He scores the 2 touchdowns, but he's not going to score the 2 touchdowns every week. He is someone that you can pick up and can put in fantasy starting lineups, but I think he's going to be frustrating throughout the season. I could see him scoring 8 touchdowns this year. So you're going to be happy with him those 6 other weeks that he scores a touchdown. But those weeks that he doesn't score a touchdown, he's going to have 4 or 5 catches. And that might not be enough for you to be happy with his fantasy production. So there could be other weeks as well where the Chargers are simply winning their game and get to run the ball a lot like Greg Roman wants to do, which he hasn't really been able to do a ton of with Los Angeles, but all the offseason moves pointed to them running the ball more. They're not going to have to face the Kansas City Chiefs every week, so there are going to be games where where Los Angeles is winning and gets to run the ball more and not passing as much. And when they are passing, McConkey is still going to be the top priority. Keenan Allen is still going to be a priority in three wide receiver sets. So that's why Johnson is lowered for me because he's like in contention for the number two receiver on a run first team where Calvin Austin is the clear number two receiver for a team that could be more pass heavy.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think, just because they were more pass heavy in week one doesn't mean that they're not going to be run heavy, going forward, right? And such a big part of Quentin Johnston's success too is going to stem from Justin Herbert, who looked great in week one. He was fantastic, and I was just really encouraged by the Chargers offense as a whole. I thought Justin Herbert was excellent. Obviously, Keenan Allen out there was nice. He had the one drop or whatever, but I mean, even Omarion Hampton, like he's going to be fine as well. Like people were panicking about him because he was quote unquote bad, but dominated the backfield snaps and touches as well. He'll figure it out, and he won't have to face Steve Spagnuolo's defense every week either. So again, just be patient out there with these guys. But yeah, nice to see from Quentin Johnston in week one. Um, Hey, here's a new one. I feel like, well, I mean, he must have been on the waiver wire list for us near the end of last season, if I remember correctly. Kayshon Boutte of the New England Patriots, Nate. Right now, he's our favorite for the Patriots wide receiver group for waivers. But if this goes anything like last year, we're going to be talking about a new Patriots wide receiver next week and maybe one the week after that and so on and so on. But let's hope not. And hopefully Boutte is the one that we can trust for some consistency, Nate.
Yeah, I think he was on the waiver list like the middle of last year once he was that
Okay,
clear
perfect.
wide receiver in terms of playing time. But he was the number one wide receiver in terms of playing time this week, very consistently playing in both three and two wide receiver sets. No other wide receiver was consistently on the field in either set. It was Diggs and Douglas playing with him in three wide receiver sets, Matt Collins playing with him in two wide receiver sets. Yeah, plenty of rotation in there as well, but that was kind of the main groups where Kyle Williams, a clear fifth wide receiver on the depth chart right now. Uh, when I was first putting the waiver wire list together, I was like, okay, he had the 100 receiving yards. Anyone who has 100 receiving yards and is available on the waiver wire, at least worth considering. But then I remembered late last season, he was having a good stretch of games, those last 3 games of the season, 5 receptions, 95 yards, a touchdown. 4 receptions, 28 yards, so not as good in that middle game, but then 7 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown. So if you look at wide receivers over the past 4 weeks of the regular season, he is one of the top producing wide receivers. So not the name that we thought might emerge out of New England, but this isn't just a 1 game sample where he's done well. This is 3 of the last 4 games where he has put up a ton of fantasy production. So he is definitely worth considering. That being said, Diggs, I think, was limited in this game. They're easing him back into action. He didn't play at all in the preseason. Not all that surprised that they limited his playing time this week. Would not be surprised if Diggs earns more playing time in the upcoming weeks. Not sure if that will necessarily cut into the playing time of Kayshawn, but I could see Diggs receiving more targets. Also, Douglas did not see as many targets as I thought he would see. So I think there's still room for this wide receiver room to evolve. But if the Patriots offense starts playing better than it has, there's also room for potentially 2 wide receivers to be fantasy relevant in this offense.
Yeah, let's hope so, right? I just want to see some consistency, knowing who to trust in New England, and hopefully it is Keyshawn Booty or Boot. I mean, look, if he sticks on the list here, I'll learn how to pronounce his name properly. I'll be honest with you, I honestly don't know exactly how it is. It's like Yahoo with me. I blame it on my Canadianness. Okay, don't yell at me. All right, in Houston, there has been a lot of changes from last season, mainly due to the Tank Dell injury, Stephon Diggs departing, among others. But Christian Kirk is new to the team, though we didn't see him in week 1. So what are your thoughts on his fantasy football potential once he is back in the lineup, Nate?
Yeah. So he was injured, didn't play this week. I think that led a decent number of fantasy managers to release him. I know we have our fantasy leagues with the people in our Discord, and in my league, the news broke while the draft was going on, and then right after the draft, the person who had Christian Kirk dropped him for Jalen. So Kirk is someone that I think once he's back in the lineup, he should have that slot role locked down. It was Justin Watson playing in the slot this past week, so Kirk's definitely playing ahead of Watson in the slot. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the 2 wide receiver sets, since that's where Jaden Higgins was seeing his playing time, was more so in the 2 wide receiver sets and 3 wide receiver sets. But in this offense, I think the slot receiver can be valuable. We need to see the Texans offense play better than it did in week 1 in order for that to happen. But I think the upside of Kirk is Stephon Diggs in this offense averaged 15.2 points per game playing out of the slot, which was 18th best for wide receivers. Their offensive coordinator, Nick Cali, was coached for the Patriots and the Rams during both of those stretches. They were top 5 teams in receiving yards to slot receivers. So I think theoretically the slot role in this offense can be very good. And I think Kirk will have the slot role. So that's why Kirk's on the list. Is I think he has the chance of being the fantasy starter, even though he started the year injured.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another currently injured wide receiver is Brandon Ayuk, who is rostered in just 40% of leagues. So he's another one. Like if you have the space, he could be one that's worth the stash, where San Francisco going through some injuries once again. So hopefully he's back sooner than later, but he is on the pup list, I believe. So we got to wait.
Yep. So it'll be at least a couple more weeks. Wide receiver 15 in 2022, wide receiver 14 in 2023. Generally expect wide receivers coming back from injury to not be playing at the same level they were before the injury. So not expecting him to be quite that top 20 wide receiver, but maybe there's no one left in San Francisco to play by the time Ayuk gets there. So Ayuk could be getting all the targets at that point, but hopefully the 49ers players can find a way to stay healthy, because they are a very good team when everyone is healthy. We just have not seen that in basically 2 years now.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I don't know what's going on there. George Kittle sounds like he'll be out quite a while with the hamstring injury. Of course, scores a touchdown, looks great, and then now he's injured. So big
Brock
one there. But
Purdy is also in doubt for
Brock
this
Purdy,
upcoming week. Jawan Jennings, we're still waiting to hear back on him as well. But
God. Yeah, it's got to be frustrating for the 49ers right now. But how about the Minnesota Vikings, Nate? We watched them on Monday Night Football last night. Originally, I know Adam Thielen was in this spot. You made the switch to Jalen Naylor. So what did you see from the Vikings wide receivers to put Naylor ahead of Thielen on the waiver wire list for you?
yeah, the big thing here is this spot is for anyone looking for a wide receiver specifically for this week and are not able to get those top couple of wide receivers that are similarly available in a very high percentage of leagues. Naylor available in 99.5% of leagues. The big thing here is the Vikings face the Falcons this week, which is a fairly good matchup for them. Naylor was the one that was the every down wide receiver. I thought there was a chance that Thielen would be the number two receiver because in my head, I'm like, if they're trading for Adam Thielen, it's because they need a wide receiver, not just for the first 3 weeks of the season when Jordan Addison's suspended, but for the entire season. But it looks like when everyone is healthy, Thielen will be the number four wide receiver on the team rather than the number three. So since this seems like they just wanted the depth at wide receiver, and this wasn't concerns about Jalen Naylor at all, Naylor was consistently on the field. Um, had some decent plays in there. The Vikings offense really took some time to really get going. And then in the fourth quarter, they looked very good. So hopefully they can continue that momentum heading into this upcoming week. Naylor, not someone I think has long term fantasy value because once Addison is there, then Naylor is probably the lowest priority out of all the skill players in the offense. But for the short term, he's the number two wide receiver in a good matchup this upcoming week. So if you're, for whatever reason, in a position where you need a wide receiver and just care about this week, don't care about the rest of the season, Naylor could be your best option.
Yeah, makes sense. Nice short-term value here. And man, oh, man, hopefully that Minnesota offense looks like they do, like they did in the fourth quarter, because I was scared in the first three quarters there against the Bears defense. They did not look good. Luckily, JJ McCarthy turned it around and then got, Justin Jefferson more involved, and they were able to get going there. So that was nice to see. And yeah, Jalen Naylor playing in that role, I think could have some value for, if you're in that kind of Jordan Addison type role there for the short term here. But looking at the list, Nate, is that Troy Franklin I see on the list? Is it time? Are you trying to get my hopes up? Why is Troy Franklin on the list?
Well, I'll skip about talking about Troy Franklin. Let's go back to the Vikings game. Week one, lots of things I got right, lots of things I got wrong. I'm glad I got Jordan Mason right. Glad I got to end the week having something that I got right because Marvin Mims is someone that did not live up to my expectations there. He was playing in two wide receiver sets throughout the preseason, did not play in two wide receiver sets in this game. It was Troy Franklin playing in both two wide receiver sets and three wide receiver sets. Franklin playing over 75% of the two wide receiver sets on a 60 something percent of the three wide receiver sets, was still rotating in and out a little bit. Played just under 60% of snaps, so not quite what you like to see. But this is still an opportunity for Franklin where if he keeps playing well, then he'll earn more of that playing time, be closer to a starter's worth of snaps, and could play out in that role. So it did not look good for Mims. I also thought there'd be more rotation in the slot of who was in the slot, sometimes Franklin, sometimes Mims. It was pretty consistently Franklin in the slot this week, which hurt Mims, helps Franklin. So not as excited about Mims anymore. And I do think Franklin, while I wouldn't want him in my fantasy starting lineup in the short term, I think he is someone who could develop into a fantasy starter if things continue to go right for him.
Yeah, I mean, look, as hopeful as I am, I love Troy Franklin. We've seen Sean Payton tease us before, so I do. I'm with you. I want to see like some consistency here with him as that kind of wide receiver too, before I get too excited. But I'm hopeful that's for sure. And obviously a bummer for Marvin Mims, but again, not trying to get too up or too down after just 1 week. Let's just adjust a bit, get ready for another ride in week 2, and if things stay the same or change again, then at least we get some of that info that we can work off to kind of reset our expectations going forward. But yeah, Broncos wide receiver core feels like it's going to be one that we'll be monitoring here for a few weeks. Here's another fun one. Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants makes the list, Nate. We talked about him, I think, a little bit in the offseason, right? Because of his role. I can't even remember which episode it was. We did so many episodes, but definitely liked the potential for targets, even if they were those short area targets for Wan'Dale Robinson. There's some value in that for deeper leagues. So he's on the list for you this week.
Yeah, I think it was after that first week of the preseason where the Giants were resting some of their starters and Robinson was getting some snaps in two wide receiver sets, which got me excited that maybe he'll get more snaps in two wide receiver sets. Didn't end up being the case. The Giants, like I said at the top of the show, that one team that the wide receivers were consistent with last year. Robinson just being that third wide receiver and three wide receiver sets, but the Giants like to run a lot of 11 personnel. So that isn't quite as concerning for Robinson as it is a lot of other slot receivers. He was just someone last year, top 50 in fantasy points scored. Typically, most wide receivers who are in the top 50 are on fantasy rosters. Robinson's kind of been the exception. He was someone that was on the waiver list plenty last year. just because he was one of the top available options. Not the highest upside player that you can get because he's in that Giants offense, because he's only playing in the slot, because he just gets a lot of those short passes and just gets a lot of PPR points because of that. I expect things to be very similar this year. Caught 6 passes for 55 yards. Not someone you want consistently starting in your fantasy starting lineup, but I think he is someone who, with bye weeks not coming up in the next week or two, but eventually there are going to be bye weeks. And if you're rostering a lot of these high upside players who aren't quite working out yet and need that fill in, Robinson is someone who I think is fine to have in your fantasy starting lineup over the course of a couple of games during the season. Also, if someone gets injured, Robinson is probably like one of the very safer options on the list, even though his upside is not as high as a lot of other wide receivers on the list.
Yeah, that's kind of what he is, right? He's this, solid floor type option, right? Like you said, he doesn't have this high ceiling or anything, but um, he's going to get a lot of targets because he plays that, screen target type role. That's where his targets are going to come from. He had like a 3.3 average depth of target in week one on 8 targets. So that's absolutely worth a deep league flex spot when you need him because it just feels like it's still very much Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson as the top 2 targets there in New York. So Nate, on Friday, we watched the Kansas City Chiefs. We watched Xavier Worthy suffer an injury. Rashee Rice is already suspended. So Juju Smith-Schuster makes the list for you coming in, available in 99% of ESPN leagues right now. So we're still waiting for more clarity on whether Worthy's going to miss a week or not, but Juju Smith-Schuster makes the list for you.
Yeah, first off, I'll note Hollywood Brown, I know, has made some people's waiver wire
Mhm.
list. He did not qualify for this one, largely because I'm looking at ESPN leagues. He's not available in 50% of ESPN leagues. He is available in a decent amount of leagues in some places. So if he is available in your league, he probably belongs at the top of this list. But that's the only reason I didn't include Hollywood Brown. Smith Schuster here because of that Xavier Worthy injury. Worthy, it seems like, based both on the preseason and the 3 snaps we saw in the regular season, he's going to be an outside receiver for them. Hollywood Brown was the one often playing in the slot. Kansas City likes to move around their wide receivers a lot, but Smith Schuster was playing more on the outside, which wasn't his usual role. He was going to be one of those wide receivers and 3 wide receiver sets, but I think he became a higher priority in the offense because Xavier Worthy wasn't playing, caught 5 passes for 55 yards. We don't know how long Worthy's out for. The fact that we don't have a great update a couple of days later probably isn't the best sign. So, especially over these next 5 weeks while Rashee Rice is dealing with his suspension, if Worthy is also missing significant time there, then Smith Schuster becomes the number 2 wide receiver. The pretty clear number 2 receiver. Tyquan Thornton's the other one, and Thornton was a very clear deep threat for Kansas City. Think that Justin Watson role or Marquez Valdes-Scantling role in the past. So I think Smith Schuster could be the number 2 passing option for the next month for Kansas City potentially. So when you can add the number 2 wide receiver option on a team with Patrick Mahomes, there's definitely some fantasy value to be had there, even though Smith Schuster hasn't had the highest ceiling in the past couple seasons.
For sure. And then from Juju to Ray, Darnell Mooney was not available for the Falcons in week one. So Ray McLeod also makes the list for you, Nate.
Oh yeah, this one is actually specifically around Drake London getting injured late in
Mm.
the game and not knowing if London will be able to play this upcoming week. Ray McLeod was the 3rd wide receiver and 3 wide receiver sets like he has been. That didn't change this week. The Falcons did use a little bit more 2 tight end sets than we're used to, so that was bad news for McLeod's long-term value. Good news for Kyle Pitts in there though. But if Drake London were to miss time, I could see McLeod being the number 2 wide receiver for them, playing a lot of Drake London's role, which could mean a ton of targets for him since the Falcons have those pretty clear roles for their wide receivers. So if London does miss time, then I think McLeod would be the top fill-in in Atlanta and have a decent number of targets.
Nice. Okay, final position for the day, tight ends. Nate, you have no shortage of tight ends for us to choose from this week. I'm counting 8 of them. So let's get into it here and start with Hunter Henry in New England.
Yeah, we're probably saving the best for last because there were injuries to Brock Bowers, injuries to George Kittle. So definitely at least 2 teams looking for your tight end. Also, teams who maybe drafted Evan Ingram, Mark Andrews, maybe even Travis Kelsey looking for a tight end. So lots of people looking for tight ends and a lot of options emerging. So you'll probably have to fight for a tight end in your league. So put in a number of bids for different players. Hunter Henry is the one at the top of my list. I know everyone's excited about the younger players, but Henry is probably the most reliable option on the list. He's been a borderline fantasy starter the last couple seasons. He's had a couple pretty excellent games and then a lot of okay games mixed in. But we saw his role change a little bit this week compared to what we've seen in the past. He was more consistently playing in both the one wide receivers, or specifically the one wide receiver sets, because it's him and Austin Hooper in the two wide receiver set or two tight end sets. Hooper is someone that I was a little bit higher on heading into the season just because he already had experience with the coaches, with Josh McDaniels with the Raiders, with Mike Vrabel with the Titans. So it just happened to be that Hooper had played with those coaches before, where Hunter Henry didn't have that same experience. Because of that, I thought Henry, if anything, was going to see a decrease in playing time this year, but he played more than he was playing in any game last season. Caught a number of passes, which was also good to see. So I think Henry is someone who was that borderline fantasy starter that you couldn't quite trust last year because his playing time wasn't quite perfect. Now, with that slight increase in playing time, I think he's someone that you can fairly safely put in your fantasy starting lineup. Probably not going to be a top five tight end this year, but I think is very capable of being a top 10 or top 12 player.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing, right? Like you're looking for a fill in for guys like Brock Bowers or George Kittle. Henry, I'm with you. Absolutely feels like a good option, as well as this next one here. Another favorite of mine from this offseason, Brenton Strange of the Jacksonville Jaguars had a decent week one, available in around 80% of leagues, Nate. So you like Brenton Strange's usage here coming out of that first week?
Oh yeah, it was fairly solid, similar to some of his best games from last season. Played 78.8% of snaps, nearly every snap in two tight end sets. Very frustratingly, the one play that he didn't play in a two tight end set, that's when one of the backup tight ends, Johnny Munt, scored a touchdown. So had it been any of the other ones, he could have been the one scoring that touchdown. So unfortunately, Strange didn't score, but he did see a number of catches this week. My one concern there is Liam Cohen's offenses haven't typically featured the tight ends a ton, and we saw the wide receivers not have great weeks. So I could see other weeks where the wide receivers are scoring a lot more. Strange, maybe not scoring quite as much, but I think Strange is a very safe top 20 tight end option over the rest of the season. We'll see if he ends up being in the top 12. There's a chance that Strange is a bigger part of the offense than we've seen tight ends in the past in Liam Cohen's offenses. And Trevor Lawrence does have a history of throwing to tight ends too, which certainly helps. So I think there's a chance Strange ends up as a top 10 fantasy tight end, maybe even top five if everything goes perfectly. But Strange, I think, could also just be a top 15 tight end and be someone who's more frustrated to have in fantasy lineups. So I think Strange has a little bit more upside than Henry, but I think Henry is the safer option of the two.
Yeah, I like it, and yeah, hopefully not losing touchdowns to Hunter Long. Unfortunately, that was frustrating one for Brenton Strange, but it'll be another week too, right? Where there will be weeks where Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, they're more involved, right? They'll be passing more as well. Like they only had 31 dropbacks, 19 completions for Trevor Lawrence, so fairly low volume passing game for the Jaguars. So there's definitely potential there for Brenton Strange with that role in this offense. And then also on the list, another favorite of ours from rookie draft time, the Harold Fannin Jr. was a historically productive college tight end. Now he starts off cooking in the NFL after just one game. Nate, was the usage as encouraging, I guess, as his stat line in week one?
Sure. So he caught the 7 passes for 63 yards. I know he is a very hyped tight end at the moment, top of a lot of people's list. And like I know you and I are both in plenty of leagues where the top two tight ends we talked about are taken, which makes Fannin the clear top option. And a lot of the other guys we talked about in this um, are also not available in a number of leagues. So Fannin might be the top option in several leagues for the waivers this week because he is available in 99.2% of ESPN leagues. The usage was fairly decent because the Browns used a ton of two tight end sets. Njoku was still playing ahead of Bannon a lot in those one tight end sets, but they used so much two tight end sets that this week it didn't matter. I'll be curious to see how what Cleveland does going forward because we've seen it in the past where teams use a lot of two tight end sets for whatever reason. It happens to be week one where it happens. We saw it with the Ravens last year where Isaiah Likely was excellent and the clear tight end one option off waivers after week one. And then that didn't materialize into much over the rest of the season. We saw the Raiders in their first game with Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers use a ton of two tight end sets, and then they moved away from that in week two. So if they do move away from that, we could see Fannin see a notable decrease in snaps this upcoming week, which wouldn't be great. But there's also a chance that Fannin can overtake Njoku as the number one tight end at some point. It's just 1 week. He was a fourth round rookie. It's completely understandable that a fourth round rookie tight end did not beat out a tight end who's been in the top 10 of fantasy production these past couple seasons on a per game basis at this point. So Bannon, I think you're taking a risk. I probably don't want him in my fantasy starting lineup this week, but there is also a chance that Bannon, based on how well he played in college, based on how much Cleveland needs receivers in this offense, he could be a top five fantasy tight end the rest of the way. Yeah, he would need to beat out Njoku. I think best case scenario, Njoku, who's in the last year of his contract, ends up getting traded. If that happens, then that's excellent news for Bannon. But we've hoped for years that there's a team that has two fantasy relevant tight ends. It really hasn't happened since the New England Patriots like 15 years ago. So we've hoped for it. It hasn't happened yet. I'm not over Njoku. Njoku had some catches in this game. He had more playing time. I don't think Njoku's done. He's still a good tight end. So we'll see what happens in Cleveland, but I'm definitely happy to pick up Bannon as a speculative ad at this point.
Yeah, I love Fannin, obviously, but I'm with you. You with Njoku there, like I'm still tempering expectations kind of going forward, right? And obviously the hope is that, yeah, for dynasty purposes, Fannin eventually becomes a tight end one in Cleveland, and it's Njoku's final year of his contract as well. So maybe he does start to work in a little bit more. And like you said, there's a trade possibility too. But yeah, Fannin, look, the potential's there. I don't think he should have ever got to day three in the draft, but I'm not a talent evaluator. I just really liked Harold Fannin. I thought he was very good coming out and hopeful here after week one. But yeah, I know it was Nick Bodiford, a friend of the show here, who had asked too, like, would you take Harold Fannin over Mark Andrews after this first week, right? And Mark Andrews was really frustrating in week one, especially considering Isaiah Likely was out. Just the one catch for 5 yards. I know as somebody who needed only like 4 or 5 points from him from like a tight end premium league to win a game this week, I was quite frustrated with him. But I think, yeah, what do you think there, Nate? As far as usage wise for Andrews versus Fannin, still holding on Andrews or reason to panic there?
Like Andrews was someone I had on my to avoid list because of that
Yeah.
rotation and likely will be back. That'll lead to more rotations. But with Andrews, the big thing is he needs a touchdown. And if he scores a touchdown, you're happy with him. If he doesn't, you're not. He didn't score
Mhm.
the touchdown this week. You weren't happy with him, but he's going to score touchdowns throughout the rest of the season. So I think Andrews is the safer option, even though you're going to be frustrated half the weeks of the season, where fans, the more high risk, high reward. Like, yeah, this was a great week one, but they could go back to using more three wide receiver sets like every team always does after a week of having heavy two tight end usage. So we'll see what happens in Cleveland. I'm probably sticking with Andrews among the two for now, but I would completely understand if someone wants to pick up Bannon. A large part just depends on who your second tight end is on your roster, assuming you have a tight end, second tight end, and if you can put that second tight end in your lineup. If you do have a safer option like a Hunter Henry, then I'd be more fine dropping Mark Andrews and taking that risk on Bannon.
There you go. And yeah, there you go, Nick. We'll talk more about the Ravens tight ends in just a second as well. But moving on here, it was, I would say, not a good day for the Tennessee pass catchers in week one, but somebody has to emerge there. And Chico Okonkwo is on the waiver wire target list, Nate. He is as good a shot as anyone on that team, it seems, available in nearly 90% of ESPN leagues.
Yeah, the good news is, like we saw throughout the preseason, it seemed like he was going to have a bigger role in this offense, and that ended up being the case. Played 87.7% of Tennessee offensive snaps. Best we've seen in his career was consistently playing in 11 personnel, consistently playing in two tight end sets. So that was all great to see. The only problem was the Tennessee's offense. Ward completed 12 of 28 passes for 112 yards, no touchdowns. So not great to see from a player's first game, but Tennessee does have a number of rookies that they're relying on offense in general. A lot of new players, a lot of moving parts. So it can be understandable that week one wasn't the great. It's not like facing the Denver Broncos is the easiest opponent to face in your first NFL career game either. So expect things to get better for the Tennessee offense, but also expect Okonkwo's playing time to remain very high when we had a week where there are plenty of tight ends who did not see the playing time that we expected. So um, and a lot of other weeks, Okonkwo would have been the top waiver wire option at tight end because of this increased role. He has been in the past for seeing not as large of an increase in snaps, but because there were so many other good tight end options this week, he is down the list. But if you miss out on some of these other tight ends, end up with Okonkwo, I think there are going to be weeks where he can be a fantasy starter. And if this Tennessee offense improves over the course of the season, Okonkwo might become a more consistent fantasy starter.
Yeah, I'm still hopeful. Look, they're not going to play Denver every week, but yeah, it was not good for the Titans. Nobody had more than 29 receiving yards, and that was Tony Pollard on one catch. So they were not good. Might be a long season for Cam Ward and company, but again, there will be better matchups. That offensive line, again, still a problem. I'm probably going to double down on the Jared versus sack bet. Shout out DraftKings for this week as well. But let's move on here. Another rookie tight end makes the list, Nate. This time it is second rounder Mason Taylor of the New York Jets.
Yeah, Taylor missed a little bit of time in training camp and the preseason, and in the game that we saw was kind of rotating with Jeremy Ruckert, so was a little bit concerned about his usage immediately. But he played an 87.5% of snaps for the New York Jets, so he was very consistently on the field. Similar to Okonkwo in that he didn't see much production, only caught one pass for 20 yards. It was his only target in the game, so that wasn't great to see. But in terms of playing time, like most tight ends who see 85 plus percent of fantasy or percent of snaps become fantasy relevant. It's only guys like K. Dotton who's in an offense where he's consistently on the field, but there are so many other options in the offense. And the Jets, there aren't that many other options in the offense. There's the running backs, there's Garrett Wilson. They don't have a lot else at wide receiver. So I think Taylor could emerge as that number two player in targets. I'll also note that going back several months when we were talking about rookies, we talked about the rookie tight ends beyond those top two players. We talked about the third, fourth, fifth, sixth guy, and we weren't doing that as much at wide receiver. And now we're talking about two of those tight ends again as waiver wire options. And we're not really talking about any other wide receiver who's a rookie as an option who really emerged out of the first week of the regular season.
For sure. And look, it's a wide open opportunity here for Mason Taylor. Like you said, it's the Garrett Wilson show first, right? But outside of that, if it's a tight end like Mason Taylor that emerges, then that could be huge here. So worth taking a shot on. And the same thing with the next guy on the list, Jawan Johnson in New Orleans. Again, another situation, another receiving core where outside of Chris Olave, like it feels wide open. And Jawan Johnson, what did he have? 11 targets this week. So there's absolutely opportunity there.
Yeah, played nearly 100% of snaps. So he had one of his best games of his career. The thing to note with Johnson is like we've seen in the past him not be a fantasy relevant tight end. So that moves him down the list a little bit because this is kind of the anomaly. And then also Foster Moreau started the season on the PUP list. Taysom Hill started the season on the PUP list. Especially once Foster Moreau is back, I'd expect Johnson's playing time to decrease, where a lot of these other tight ends who had a big role in week one, expect them to continue having a big role over the rest of the season. So I think if you are looking for a tight end specifically over the next month, I would have Johnson higher on the list. But because I'm often looking at this more from the entire rest of the season point of view, I don't have Johnson quite as high as some of these other high upside players. So I think Johnson perfectly fine to take a chance on, especially if you need a tight end and you weren't able to get your hands on some of the other players, or specifically like if you had George Kittle and you're looking for that replacement just for these couple of weeks and you're happy to put George Kittle back in your lineup. You don't care about the long-term prospects. So you don't want to take a chance on someone like Fannin who might see a decrease in snaps. We expect Johnson to continue playing a very high percentage of snaps going forward at the very least. So I think if Kittle was your guy or Brock Bowers was your guy and you're looking for that short-term replacement and Hunter Henry isn't available, Johnson might be your best option.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, led the team in receiving yards this week with 76 and yeah, 11 targets. That's wild. Olave with 13 as well. And it's funny, right? Another case where we knew Olave was going to get a ton of targets. Not all of them would be catchable, but it's going to lead to usable fantasy production more often than not here. All right. Speaking of the Raiders tight end situation as well, you mentioned Brock Bowers a few times, Nate. So Michael Mayer makes the list as well. Was this a result of the Brock Bowers injury or usage, or both?
It was to do with the injury. That was more so it, even though the usage was there where Mayer was cutting into Bauer's playing time on early downs, like I said in the preseason. But that's not why you're picking up Mayer here. It's because Brock Bauer suffered that injury. There's a chance that he misses time, in which case Mayer would be the clear tight end one in this offense. This offense that is prepared to throw the ball to the tight end. They were throwing the ball to Bowers. They were throwing the ball to Mayer. So I think Mayer would see a decent number of targets and be a potential fantasy starter if he is the starter this week. The only problem there is we don't know about the Bowers injury now. We don't know when we'll know about the Bowers injury. This could be something that goes right up to game time, and we might not know until those 90 minutes before they announce inactives, in which case the Raiders play at 10 p.m. Eastern on Monday Night Football. So I am sorry in advance for when I am tired this podcast next week because I will be staying up late for that game. But because of that, like you might not know if you can start Michael Mayer until all of those other games finished, in which case you would have to cut Mayer, pivot to Tyler Conklin, assuming Conklin's available in your league. And when there are so many other tight end options, that might not be the best situation for you. So I think it's fine to take a risk on Mayer, especially if you're in one of these deeper leagues where you have the roster spots where you can put him on your roster, find out what happens with Bowers throughout the week, and then make a decision later in the week who you're starting at tight end. But I think Mayer could definitely have a big week if he is the starter.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to monitor. Hopefully, we get some info sooner rather than later. I know, like they were talking about Bowers wanting to go back in the game or something like that. After he got checked and everything, which not always the most trustworthy injury data, right? But at least somewhat encouraging that he'll be fine, and that they've called him day to day as well. So I would hope that means that we get some good practice info for him ahead of that 10 o'clock game on Monday night. And then final name on the list here, Nate, worth a stash at tight end is Isaiah Likely, who will hopefully another one be back sooner rather than later for the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh yeah, all of my sleeper tight ends made this list, so likely was going to make it as well. Obviously, didn't play this week, was out with the injury, so didn't think much would happen in terms of how much we're valuing likely. But the fact that Mark Andrews didn't have the best game might be a positive sign for likely. I wouldn't read a ton into it at the moment, but likely is someone who, same reasons we said all offseason, like at one point, John Harbaugh said he wants likely to be an all pro. So likely would have to be an every down tight end for that to happen. We're a year closer to Likely's peak, a year away from Mark Andrews' peak. So there's a chance that Likely can become the top receiving tight end for Baltimore, which is one of the best offenses in the NFL that has a history of featuring the tight ends. So Likely might have the best odds of being a top five fantasy tight end out of anyone in this group. But there's also a chance that we see the exact same stuff that we saw last year, in which case you're never comfortable putting Likely in your lineup. So if you are fine stashing a tight end, Likely is definitely worth considering. Like even with someone like Bannon, like would I rather have the top tight end in Baltimore's offense or the top tight end in Cleveland's offense? It's pretty clearly Baltimore, but we'll see what happens both Likely's injury and if anything changes out of Baltimore this year.
Yeah, for sure. We covered it a few times this offseason, right? Like Likely's role increasing as Mark Andrews' role decreased, right? As far as passing downs go. So I think, if he can get back healthy quickly, I think, from what we saw, at least from Mark Andrews in week one, I think there's absolutely still potential for Likely to overtake him here. Again, it's 1 week. Mark Andrews, I'm sure, will have better weeks than what he did in week one catch for 5 yards. But even still, if Likely's in the lineup, he absolutely has the higher ceiling here if he does emerge there in this offense. But that's it for this week. So thanks to everyone who tuned in. Good luck attacking those waiver wires, and remember to stay active all season and locked in all season long, because I promise you, if you do, you'll have an edge over the majority of your league mates. So foot on the gas, go grab some gems off the waivers, and good luck in week 2. Nate, thank you to you as well. Please do let everybody know what you have going on over at pff.com this week.
Sure. So far I have the recap for Sunday, the recap for Monday, the waiver wire article, new article this week, the usage or this season, the usage and production report, where I take my recap article. I do something similar to the top 10 recap that I've done in the past, but I've added a ton of data to it as well. Roughly 10 tables for each player or each position group. You can look at it by player, by position, by team. So you can look at it each of those ways. In future weeks, you'll be able to filter what to whichever set of weeks you want to filter to. Obviously, right now it's just week 1, so there's only that. But I think this is going to be an excellent tool for anyone who wants to dig more into the players, because I try to summarize the data and get the data that I think you most need to know, which is what this article starts with. But if you want to dig in more to any player and come to your own conclusions, I think this is the best tool out there to do that. So definitely check out the usage and production report. Outside of that, have the usual 5 to add, 5 to drop, 5 to buy low, 5 to sell high that went up this morning. Rest of season rankings, which also went up today. Later this afternoon, I will have my rankings for this upcoming week. New this year, I'll also have the college usage and production report. I won't have nearly as much text in that because I don't write about college as much, but I built this tool for the NFL. Might as well also give it to anyone who cares about college. And I am in a college fantasy football league this year. So that's basically exclusively what I use for my waiver wire ads this past week. Also, we'll be doing a better job of keeping up with dynasty rankings this season. So, dynasty rankings will have an updated version of those on Wednesday as well. And then Thursday, these will start sit and the recap for Thursday Night Football. And then we do it all again next week.
Love it. Yeah, the utilization report article was excellent. A lot of crucial data in there. Really good stuff by Nate building that, and of course, data not possible without the best data collection team in the multiverse here at PFF. So make sure you go check that out. Use the promo code PFF Fantasy Podcast 25 as well to get 25% off a PFF Plus subscription. You'll get access to all that wonderful data. As for me, I got the IDP Fantasy Report. It's out now. Very similar to what Nate is doing on the offensive side, just doing it for the IDPs. You got all your snap shares for your defensive players. You got waiver targets on there, and so much more. I'll also have the IDP rankings article out this week. And then starting this week, now that we got the data in as well, wide receiver man zone coverage report will be out, and the new red zone report as well. So that'll look at all of the offensive players, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, and what their usage is in the red zone, how effective they are, but also including team matchup data as well, how bad their opponents might be in the red zone or how good they are as well. So make sure to check that out. Again, PFF Fantasy Podcast 25 is the promo code to get yourself 25% off. I'll be back on the podcast later this week. I think Thursday morning will be our IDP Start Sit podcast. But then Nate and I will be back doing waivers again in week 2, or coming out of week 2. So good luck in week 2. And until next time, peace out.